Everybody, welcome to another episode of the program. Today we're going to revisit some stuff in Finland. So they found this old barley grain that they discovered in the southwestern part of Finland, and essentially it's thrown a monkey wrench into the conventional thinking of the people there. So about 3,000 or so BC was this culture called the Pitted Ware culture, which was a hunter-gathering culture. They were fishermen, and they basically had this way of life. They were known for their specific style of pottery. Their existence led to the common understanding of most people, especially people that live there. They seem to care about where their origins are, whereas even in America, a lot of people don't even know what the Civil War was really about. So, anyway, so they found all this evidence, especially grain, that they were stockpiling back then. So the monkey wrench is, well, I thought these were supposed to be hunter-gatherer culture. What happened? How come suddenly we see all this evidence of agriculture pop up? Well, they think the story is pretty interesting. They think that they were influenced by another culture called, what are they called? I forget the name. Funnel-Beaker culture, not the bell beaker, the Funnel-Beaker culture, which is a culture known as basically an agricultural culture, so to speak, a subsistence culture. So this is the extent of the Funnel-Beaker culture, and as you can see, it's parts of Germany, Poland, Russia, Denmark, Norway, and the southern part of Sweden. So this culture overlapped with the bell beaker or the Pitted Ware culture, this is roughly where they were, also on the lower part of Sweden, the southern part of Sweden, and they were concurrent with each other. The Pitted Ware culture goes from 3200 BC to 2300 BC, and the Funnel-Beaker culture is 4300 to 2800 BC. So you see there's this healthy overlap here. So they think, and when we say these cultures, they're just we don't know anything about them other than the type of pottery they had. So one thing that I found interesting, though, was the fact that the Pitted Ware culture was known for their pottery, even though they were hunter-gatherers. So that must have been a clue to some inquisitive archaeologists that, hey, maybe there is something going on here. And they might have been empires, too. Maybe not the Pitted Ware culture, since they were characterized as more nomadic and more of a tribal people, but perhaps the Funnel-Beaker culture or some other agricultural groups tend to stay in one spot, and therefore that's when you start getting laws, you start getting abstract entities like the state, all of these different types of governments, and perhaps there was something like that going on, and that's how they influenced the Pitted Ware culture through by virtue of living in roughly the same spot. So anyway, this article goes on and says, the Pitted Ware culture from the Stone Age has been characterized as hardcore sealers or possibly even related to Inuits of the Baltic Sea. Now, researchers have discovered barley and wheat grains in areas previously inhabited by this culture, leading to the conclusion that the Pitted Ware culture adopted agriculture on a small scale at the very least. And then they became something else after that, very shortly after that. I think it was the Corded Ware culture, eventually just swept through, and then they were known as the settlers and the agriculturalists. I did a video on Finland regarding the origins of the Sami people, and the Sami people are essentially the first people who were inhabiting Finland, essentially. And I've gotten a lot of interesting comments on that. So you have this clash of the Sami people, and they have there's evidence that they had their own language, their own culture, their own set of societal rules that they followed, and their own way of living. And then the Corded Ware culture or some other culture that came from mainland Europe just essentially swept through. And now you have like these legends. I forget the name of the legend, but there's a story about that can be interpreted that the Sami people got displaced by these other people, whether it was the Corded Ware culture or the remnants of the Pitted Ware culture, whoever it was, there was a change in genetics there. So anyway, so this video is very interesting with all that in mind. So they found grains of barley and wheat in Pitted Ware settlements on Finland's Åland Islands in the region of modern Stockholm. So let's go to that picture right here. So Åland is here. As you can see, it's these islands southwest of Finland here. And you can see that based on this map, this is where they aged all, or they tested all the age of all the cereal grains found. And you can see the legend. So the stuff in the yellow triangles are early Neolithic, the orange circles are middle, and then the green squares or the green diamonds rather are late Neolithic. So the Åland Islands, there's three. One of them dates to the middle Neolithic. So that's already 5,000 years ago. That already throws a monkey wrench, because by that time, based on conventional wisdom, they were just hunter-gatherers. So there was definitely going on here. There was an exchange of ideas, an exchange of a way of life. It seemed pretty peaceful for the most part. The article doesn't mention anything about a violent takeover. So maybe they had some sort of partially maritime trade going on here. So that must mean that they were, they must have had some level of sophistication in terms of engineering ships, trade routes, exchange of ideas. So it must have been a really, really rich time. And I would love to see some marine archaeology go on here and see if they find anything else. So the grains originated in the period of Pitted Ware culture, already went over that. Plant remnants included hazelnut shells, apple seeds, tuberous roots of lesser celandine and rose hips. So these are all that obviously come from, they're harvested. They come from an agricultural people or groups. So they learned farmers of the Funnel-Beaker. This is a main, they don't know if this is true, but this is the main conclusion that they're drawing, and it makes the most sense because they did live concurrently. One group was hunter-gatherer, another group was agricultural, and it makes sense that they would rub off on each other, especially if you look at the genetics and see that they are related, or their descendants rather are related. So that must mean the Funnel-Beaker culture expanded from continental Europe to Scandinavia. So again, something must have, it wasn't like some spur of the moment, hey, let's just cross the ocean suddenly. No, this must have been a very significant event. It's like a milestone, essentially. They crossed over, they saw other people there, and then instead of killing them, I'm assuming, they traded goods with them. And they were very friendly, I'm assuming. The grains found on Åland are proof that the Pitted Ware culture introduced cultivation into places where it had not yet been practiced, which is very interesting. That means, well, I'll get into that in a second. Well, I'll just talk about it right now. So if this is 5,000 years, right, and let's take this other. Okay, so this is Europe, this is Spain, if you guys can't see it. So this is Spain, Italy, Germany, Sweden, and then the British Islands. So we see they had agriculture. And so it spreads up here by 5,000 years ago. It might have been earlier. Göbekli Tepe, Turkey is, you can't see it on the map, but if you can follow my cursor here, it's somewhere here. And if that is the origin of agriculture that we can surmise based on all the evidence, then it does make sense that it would, if it did spread the way it did, it would spread in most directions, namely into the Middle East and into Europe, Eastern Europe, and then Western Europe, and then Northern Europe. And that seems to be what we're looking at here. And the people that we're talking about, the Pitted Ware culture, were largely confined to just this island here, to Sweden. So it does make sense that they would spread their influence further and further as the years went on. So Göbekli Tepe, let's say 8,500 BC, let's just say that. It does make sense over a few thousand years they'd finally make it up here. So I hope this that makes a lot of sense to you guys, and I hope you guys see the significance of this article now, because it pinpoints. We can kind of put a thumbtack in there and say, okay, 5,000 years that we know of now, whereas before they thought it was way less. It was almost 1,000-year difference. We're pushing it back 1,000 years rather. And that means they found it on this island first, so they're probably going to start looking into mainland Finland and see if they find anything else. Research on ancient DNA in recent years has proven that the spread of agriculture in Europe was almost exclusively owing to migrants. So again, we have these foreign people coming in and spreading these ideas. So that's very, very peculiar. That should be noted. We find it possible that this population, which was primarily specialized in marine hunting, continued to grow plants as a practice provided the community with social significance. Now, if you're a hunter-gatherer culture and then you meet these people, these migrants, and they come bearing all these gifts and these instruments that you're not familiar with, you're not just going to drop your culture, your hunter-gathering culture, and fully embrace the agricultural culture right away. It's going to take some time. You're going to slowly integrate it. So they were still fishing and hunting and doing their thing, and then they grew plants on the side, and then they started developing communities that way eventually. And then after a few generations, they accepted it wholeheartedly. According to the evidence, again, according to what we have, this is all a hypothesis that we're trying to form, but it's a lot clearer picture now than it was just a few months ago. An abundance of pig bones were found at Pitted Ware sites, but they were more wild pigs. They weren't really domesticated pigs. Very interesting. They had ritual feasts where pigs and cereal products were consumed. They might have brewed beer, which I think they definitely did. So this research relies primarily on archaeobotanical methodology. So basically they collected soil samples and then they extracted plant remains from the samples by using this flotation method. So I'm guessing that they put water or some other fluid just to separate the two. I don't think it's confusing, but it's similar. I think it just separates the stuff from the other stuff. Grains and seeds have turned into carbon after coming into contact with fire, so they were burnt, and then they just measure using radiocarbon dating. They radiocarbon date they get the radiocarbon 14 isotope, and then they just track they find out the half-life, and then they track how much it's degraded, and then they just do the math, and they can determine it with the precision of within a few centuries, which is really, really good. Yeah, I thought this was really interesting stuff, guys. And one thing that I look for when I read these articles are if there are any patterns or any parallels in other either other continents or other examples in the world where we see similar things. And in this case, it would be not just one civilization or one group of people rather with their own unique ideas influencing another idea, but it's also in what way did they do it? Was it a gradual thing? And in this, it seems like it's a pretty gradual thing. And you can, just by looking at the map here, you can see that as you get further and further, it gets younger and younger. So here you have a lot of early Neolithic sites from Denmark and parts of Sweden. And then as you go northeast, it gets more recent and recent. So then you get middle Neolithic on the east coast of Sweden, and then as you get to Finland, you have still middle Neolithic at the land islands, and then you start getting into late Neolithic and Bronze Age the further you go up. So that makes perfect sense to me, unless they find some groundbreaking site that predates even the early Neolithic in Finland. I think it's safe to say that before then, you had the people who were populating Finland at the time were probably either the indigenous people in Finland who were there since time immemorial, or the Siberians who came in from Russia. And basically there was another separate migration into Finland before this Pitted Ware Funnel-Beaker culture. So either way, it's very interesting stuff. I hope this made sense to you guys. If you guys are in Finland, please let me know what else you guys know. Do they teach you this in school? Or let me know like what the conventional narrative is in your school system that teaches you about the history of Finland, especially the prehistoric part of Finland before Christianity came in and all that stuff. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you guys later.